This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you in part by Telex, the interconnection company, owners and operators of 56 Marietta, the most network-rich co-location facility in the Southeast. Tag TV and Tag Radio. Technology now has a voice of innovation and information. Get it on www.tagtvonline.com. Revolutionizing billing and financial transactions, preventing fraud, deepening loyalty, and giving keen insight into customer behavior. Today's ultra-competitive financial transaction processing marketplace. Payments, risk and compliance, customer and channel management, bank platforms, biller solutions, investment services, and more. It's a whole new world of innovation in financial services. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, October 20th, 2009, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. The Tech Talk special series on financial transaction processing continues as Tino goes inside Fiserv, and it's more than 16,000 clients and 25 years experience. Fiserv is the world's largest service provider to banks, credit unions, and lending institutions in the U.S., Canada, Europe, and Latin America. Tino speaks with Joseph Dickerson, Fiserv User Experience Architect. Joe is in a lead role within the financial institution's electronic banking services innovation team, focused on integrating Web 2.0 technologies and improving the usability suite of banking applications for the global industry leader. Joe has a diverse background in software development and has provided design and usability test services for many different sites and systems. He has led field studies and ethnographic research, as well as being a trained journalist with a degree in information technology. Let's take a look from Gen Y to Baby Boomer and beyond. It's a business of tailoring technology for both user satisfaction and client profitability, as Tino Tech Talks with the innovator and field expert on the now and future marketplace of financial transactions, as we speak with Fiserv's innovating team executive, Joseph Dickerson.
Joe, thank you for joining me on Tech Talk.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
I think our listeners maybe start off would be interested you giving a quick explanation about Fiserv and what you're focused on there.
Well, Fiserv is a Fortune 500 company. It's involved in providing financial services for many different arenas. I personally am based out of the Norcross office, formerly CheckFree. Fiserv acquired CheckFree last year, and we do banking and bill pay solution for financial institutions, for small banks and large banks. And what I do for Fiserv is I'm a user experience architect. I do a lot of the design, usability testing, user research, what have you, for these solutions to make sure that they service the needs of our customers, which are the end users of the bank products.
So as consumers, we probably don't all realize the kind of research that it takes to stay on the top of your game. So maybe you can talk briefly, explain some of your recent research initiatives and the role that you play in that.
Certainly. We actually have two major research type of efforts. One is much more quantitative, where we do a lot of surveys with end users, and these are often several hundred different individuals that are asked a series of questions by another branch of our company. And then there's the research effort that I take the lead on as a member of what's called the Fiserv Innovations and Experimentation Team, which is closely aligned with our user experience group that actually executes a lot of the designs based on our early concept work. So what we actually end up doing is we do what's called ethnographic research. We actually go out to different cities and actually kind of get in people's space. We actually go to their homes. We actually we don't necessarily rifle through their drawers for dirty underwear, but we actually talk to them in a very deep, qualitative way to try and understand their needs, their motivations, their desires. And from this research, we actually create representative personas, which we then can use to basically design towards. And that allows us to basically do a great deal of compassionate understanding and empathy when it comes to creating a solution. Instead of just designing for a series of very dry requirements, we actually create these rich personalities that I'm actually in the user experience lab as I talk to you, and I'm looking at the wall of posters that we've created. One example is we have a Gen Y persona we just developed as part of Gen Y research called the creative developer, and this is the person who is a much more tech-savvy individual and much more open to doing stuff like mobile banking, for example. And so we take those personas and those representative individuals, and we look at how we should design a solution for them. And that is really a great opportunity for us to know our customer in a way that a lot of other companies don't do.
And I imagine that the nice thing about sounds like what you focus on is a lot of times you see research and maybe there's a separation between that and, or at least people might perceive there's a separation between that and actually what happens in the day-to-day basis. But it sounds like you've actually influenced product design through your research. Can you give a couple examples of that?
Oh, absolutely. We're actually working on a product which I can't really go into too much detail, which is actually sprung out of our Generation Y research, which was just completed this summer, which is a product that is basically designed around how this generation looks at their financial matters. Instead of looking at banking, 2.0, we're kind of moving to banking 3.0, which is, context is important. Mobile is very much a part of this lifestyle, and we have to, reframe our offerings for a generation that doesn't really look at banks the same way as Gen X or baby boomers do. And it's a very unique challenge that this research really helps us rise to.
How quickly is that all changing? Because in the last probably 10 years with all the mobile applications, when I was listening to news the other day, 85,000 or something were announced in terms of mobile apps, and it seems like anyone with children or people of that millennium generation take advantage of most of them. So you guys have had to move pretty quickly, I would guess, to keep stay on top of it, stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I mean, we just finished up mobile research as well. That's in addition to the Gen Y research I just spoke to. And it's moving fast, and it's mostly because of technology advancements that have occurred. Mobile 2 or 3 years ago, you were very limited in how you could present the information to the user because you had very small screens. You had very awkward UIs when it comes to the phones themselves. There's smartphones and there's dumb phones, and we found in our research there's kind of a middle ground of not so smartphones, where the screen is better, the experience is better, but it's still not the full, rich browsing experience that you get with the high-end smartphones. And we're finding that the iPhone is quickly becoming a game changer when it comes to mobile, and that's almost obvious. But when you look at the adoption rate, I just heard today that in smartphones, the iPhone is now 23% of the market in the U.S., and it's, I think, over 14 or 15% of the smartphone market internationally. And that's in less than 2 years. So, I mean, that's quickly becoming a game changer. It's quickly becoming an area of focus when it comes to what we design.
And you have a vested interest at Fiserv, of course, of driving adoption and usage online banking and mobile banking services. Do you have some best practices that you could share that you could recommend in terms of, how do you convince people to try and use new technology, particularly, I would think, when it comes to banking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one of the things that we're actually looking at is, and this actually came out of some other research we did into small businesses, where people don't read bank pages. I mean, that's one of the big things that we've had to kind of level set with individuals. People don't go to a bank site to read an article or to leisurely look around at a bank site about information. They go with a very task-driven attitude. They have to look for a particular chunk of information. They have to do a particular function, and they get in and they get out. They do not linger. And any content they see on the bank site, it tends to be something they scan and scan quickly. So what we've had to do is we've had to reset not only how verbiage is applied to a bank site, so no long, lengthy paragraphs describing a value proposition, but we're also playing with the notion of just turning stuff on for the user, just basically having them try out a feature or a function and not have to have this laborious sign-up process. It's just there the next time they go to their bank site. That way, if they are going to adopt it, they can actually interact with it in a real way, as opposed to this abstract definition of what this function does in help copy. They can actually play with it. And I think the model we're pursuing in that regard is very similar to what Google does. Google, you can just, hey, here's a new feature, try it. And of course, I mean, and we're not Google, obviously. It's a
Right.
different value, but their attitude is, not to try and sell something, it's to try and provide a service.
I would imagine that people in the different age segments, and we've kind of alluded to this already, and also demographics would come into play as well, would be more or less averse to change and maybe to the messaging itself. So how much do you focus on messaging related to financial services to consumers to help them be more receptive? Is it really target segmented to all the different ages, or how do you look at that?
Well, it's hard to segment because you really don't know what the age of your user is in many cases on a bank site. I mean, they could be a 50-year-old, they could be a 23-year-old. Sometimes you do, a lot of times you don't. What we're finding when it comes to messaging is being direct and being forthright is incredibly important. And Gen Y especially, they want honesty and full disclosure. And especially when it comes to groups of individuals such as Gen Y, who are very fee averse. I mean, this generation is looking at everything is free,
right.
Or at least an attitude that many of this generation has is information should be free. And so you have to really frame your messaging around, if there is a fee associated with service, you tell them immediately. You don't hide it. You don't try and put it on some secondary or tertiary screen. And when it comes to messaging in general, we found that users really don't mind being marketed to, as long as it's either A, entertaining. The reason why people pause those commercials in the Super Bowl is because they're entertaining as well as marketing. Or if the marketing content is relevant to them. So if you have a Gen Y person and you're trying to sell them mutual funds, well, a lot of Gen Y don't have any money. So that's marketing that's completely useless to that individual.
Right.
If you are exposing that type of value proposition to someone who is in their 50s who wants to find a place for their money, that's a relevant and useful piece of marketing. And our challenge is to try and we do have technology that actually does some of this, is to try and tailor that marketing to the user just as much as the user can tailor the experience that they have at the bank site to what they like or need to do.
This final question would fall under the category of lessons learned, I would say, and let's talk about mistakes that are made, the biggest mistakes financial service providers have exhibited, and what do they need to avoid in trying to reach, particularly let's focus on the young customers.
Well, and again, I just to kind of restate, the young customers we found in our research tend to be mobile in more than one way. They're mobile from the perspective of they use mobile technology. Almost everyone has a cell phone. But they're mobile in that they actually move. They actually go from place to place. So the brand loyalty when it comes to banks for Gen Y is a lot lower, and other studies have actually shown this as well. So that in order to get encouraged brand loyalty, you have to provide a really good and quality experience. Gen Y, we've also found, are incredibly experience sensitive. Before, like I think you're probably a Gen X or a baby boomer, but when we had a problem with a bank, we would complain to our wife or maybe a friend over golf, and that'll be about it. Well, Gen Y, they'll complain on Twitter, they'll complain on Facebook, they'll complain to all of their friends in their social network, and the word of mouth about a bad experience travels really fast. So in order to the biggest mistake that banks make is not, I think, being aware of this experience sensitivity that the younger customers have and thinking that they can just gouge their customers with fees. Well, again, this is a generation that's not used to or likes paying fees for online services. They grew up with the internet, so they grew up with all these free websites that provide a lot of value-added services. So the banks have to understand the context of the mindset of these users. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul if you try and get short-term fees and fee revenue from Gen Y, because it's going to be almost like 3 strikes and you're out. They're going to leave you for another bank. And many times what we found is the reason why Gen Y goes to a bank is a simple fact of the availability of ATM machines. So they go to these big mega banks because they have the most ATM machines in the city, and they're out being social. They use their debit cards to get money. And that sounds very strange, but that's that's what they think of it. That's the selling point for a bank. What the banks have to do is not break that model, is not misunderstand that these users are out there. In fact, they're the future customers, and that's why we have focused our research efforts so heavily on Gen Y over the past 6 months to a year.
Well, Joe, thanks a lot for taking the time. Obviously, your research is making a great impact, not just on your company, but also the banking industry. So thanks for joining me on Tech Talk today.
All right, thank you.